They showed up.
Oh,
Bravo
they did.
to them.
I'd love to see it.
Absolutely. Plus, former President Donald Trump not holding back. He is pushing against federal charges against him. Hey, good morning to you. Come on in. It is just after 6 a.m. on your Wednesday morning. The city's gloomy, so we're going to go down south to San Jose. We're looking at the sunrise right there. Some beautiful colors up in the sky for us. Because checking on our weather right now, it is a June gloom type of day, Darren.
We had to go to the mountains to be able to see clear sky.
Way out of the city.
The marine layer is full and in charge right now. So much so we're getting like mist on the...
Back on track. Thank goodness. And thank goodness for the guy with his guitar. Some entertainment, at least. Gotta love that. Let's look at our top stories now. Former President Donald Trump is now the first former or current president to face federal criminal charges. Trump pled not guilty to 37 counts in a Miami courtroom. The case centers on allegations Trump mishandled government documents and refused demands to return them. But last night, at a fundraiser in New Jersey, the former president lashed out at prosecutors and called out the case against him as political persecution. In the next half hour, we will have Jared Hill outside Trump Tower with more going on with this situation. The man accused of attacking Paul Pelosi is due back in court today. A state trial date is expected to be set for David DePape. DePape is facing state and federal charges for breaking into the home of Nancy Pelosi and beating her husband. DePape has already pled not guilty to 6 charges, including attempted murder and first-degree residential burglary. His federal trial will start October 23rd. That's your top stories. Gianna, let's talk about the A's once again. Yeah. Talk about a developing story. Wow. It is 6:11. It might be a solution to all of those empty buildings we're seeing in San Francisco. What could be done to possibly save downtown? Plus,
this kind of progress always seems impossible until it isn't.
First Lady Jill Biden visits San Francisco. Her message on gun violence. We'll be right back. In the Bay Area beat, First Lady Jill Biden visiting San Francisco this week to push for gun safety legislation. She attended a fundraising event yesterday. Kelsey Thorud was there and reports Biden spoke alongside a former lawmaker whose name is synonymous with this cause. Well, President Biden is due to visit the Bay Area next week. The White House has said he'll be here Monday through Wednesday, but has not elaborated on his schedule just yet. San Francisco has a plan to fill vacant buildings in the city's downtown. The Board of Supervisors just approved legislation making it easier to convert office space into housing by simplifying the approval process. The board says it's also changing zoning rules to allow different types of businesses in Union Square and downtown. Right now, nearly 30% of office space in San Francisco is sitting vacant. Oof. Well, good morning. Thanks for being here with us. It is 6:17 on your Wednesday morning, halfway through the week, and June gloom is in full swing.
And it's getting grayer. Even since we started talking about this an hour ago, the clouds have gotten a little lower over the city.
Amanda. Moving slow. All right, at 6:22, Elizabeth Holmes has a request from prison. Why the disgraced Theranos founder is objecting to paying back some of her victims. Plus, there's a new way to look at donating blood. See how one blood bank is tapping into mixed reality glasses to attract those younger donors. We'll be right back. Today is World Blood Donor Day. In the last decade, donors under the age of 30 have dropped by nearly a third. Blood centers nationwide are now hoping some new technology could change that. Bradley Blackburn explains. Interesting. It is 6:26. Former President Trump maintaining his innocence this morning. A closer look at what played out inside the courtroom and what's next. Right now on CBS News Bay Area, it is 6:30. Former President Trump maintaining his innocence, speaking to his supporters in New Jersey last night. This came just hours after he appeared in a Miami courtroom where he pled not guilty to federal criminal charges over the alleged mishandling of classified U.S. military documents. Jared Hill live in New York for us outside Trump Tower with the newest developments on this. And Jared, the former president, really pushing back against all of this.
Amanda, back to you.
Well, as you said, Jared, he went right back to New Jersey for a closed-door fundraiser. He's right back on that campaign trail. What does this all mean for his campaign?
Back to you.
Okay, we'll see what happens. Jared Hill live in New York for us this morning. Thank you so much. We need to get to some breaking news now. In the East Bay, police say a 16-year-old is dead and a 17-year-old is injured after a shooting in San Leandro. Authorities responded to the St. Moritz Garden Apartments on Washington Avenue around 9:10 last night. There is where they found both victims. Both were taken to a hospital, but the 16-year-old died from his injuries. The other victim in stable condition. Police say they are still looking for that shooter. Now over to our forecast for this Wednesday, halfway through the week, taking a live look outside at the Bay Bridge right there, and you can barely see the city this morning with how much fog we have, and it's kind of that wet, heavy, meh stuff outside.
That's the long way of saying June gloom is around. You know, the wet gray blanket's pretty much got everybody under it. So
don't bother doing your hair today.
Here's the perspective to get above that. Look at
Jocelyn, thank you. It is 6:38. Let's look at our top stories now. A new proposal from two San Francisco city leaders aims to ban guns from what they call sensitive places. Supervisor Catherine Stephanie and City Attorney David Chu define those places as hospitals, places of worship, movie theaters, parks, and grocery stores. This proposal comes after a violent week in the city. 9 people were injured in a mass shooting in the Mission District on Friday. And the next day, 3 others were shot at a nightclub in the city's Balboa Park neighborhood. So attorneys for Theranos founder Elizabeth Holmes are making the case that she should not pay restitution when she gets out of prison. Originally, Holmes and COO Sunny Balwani were ordered to pay $452 million to the victims of their crimes. But lawyers for Holmes say she has limited financial sources and should not be forced to pay the $250 a month. Federal prosecutors recently filed that clerical errors meant a payment schedule had not yet been set for Holmes. Let's look at your top stories. It's just about 6:40. Check fraud is back in a big way. How officials say you can protect yourself. And the market just opened about 9 minutes ago. Taking a check on the big board, we're starting down in the red this morning for the Dow Jones. Right now we're down 141 points. Before we head to break, here's what's coming up on CBS Mornings. Now for your Money Watch report, new data from the Financial Crimes Enforcement Network shows check fraud is on the rise once again. That data shows banks made around 680,000 reports of check fraud last year. That is nearly double the total from the year before. Now, officials are now warning Americans to avoid mailing checks or, if possible, use a secure mail drop like those inside the post office. Now back to a developing story this morning. Former President Donald Trump wasting no time blasting the federal case against him in a speech to his supporters at his golf club in Bedminster, New Jersey. Trump pled not guilty to 37 felony charges. Helping us break down what happened in federal court is Carlos Singh, a lecturer at San Jose State University. Carlos, thanks so much for being with us. A former prosecutor, you have some specific insight when it comes to what's going on with this case. So for what's next, this is a historic indictment. We've never seen this before, and the judge is making it clear he's going to be treated like anyone else that would be in this situation. So what's the next legal steps?
Yes, after pleading not guilty yesterday to the indictment, the next steps, and let me just first mention this. In this instance, this indictment, the special counsel comes out swinging with a sledgehammer in terms of the evidence he's presenting, because he's using Mr. Trump's recorded conversations, public statements, and statements from employees and statements from lawyer. And that's, at least on face in the first instance, it looks like quite a devastating indictment. But the next steps, I'll mention at least a couple. Court dates haven't been set, but the stage now is where the prosecution has to turn over discovery. That means turn over the information that leads or forms the basis for the charges in the indictment. So that's going to take quite a bit of time. And for this reason, because this case involves national security, there's a process when you have cases such as this, where there'll be a security officer appointed by the judge. And in order for the defense to review the documents, they have to go through a due diligence process and application to get security clearances, top secret security clearances, in order to view the documents. The documents are usually reviewed in a room, are not allowed to go out. And so that takes time in terms of the defense submitting those applications and then being reviewed and investigated to whether or not they can qualify for top secret security clearances. And then one last thing in terms of what's next. After the discovery it's like motions are going to be filed. It wouldn't be surprising that they file motions to dismiss, particularly one that I might have in mind is that selective prosecution. In other words, that Mr. Trump was singled out versus, say, the current president or Hillary Clinton. And so he's likely going to claim a move to dismiss because of selective prosecution.
Okay, obviously a very complicated situation here. So, Carlos, the former president and his legal team is going to have to navigate some really tricky circumstances here. The judge set some restrictions when it comes to him talking to witnesses. And specifically, I want to ask about him being ordered not to speak about the case with Walt Nauta, his aide and actually co-defendant in this case. I mean, how do you even regulate that when these are people he's surrounded by all the time?
It's going to be difficult, and it's not uncommon for judges to issue orders telling defendants, conspirators, people charged with conspiracy, I should say, to have a no contact rule. But in this case, because they are employees and current employees, where they provided evidence of text messages implicating the president, that it's going to be difficult to sort of watch for that. And I think essentially the prosecution, the special counsel, initially is going to obviously proceed in good faith to make and not make a big deal out of it. But if they do learn that such conversations have happened, then the judge may have to issue stronger orders.
Gotcha. All right. Carlos Singh from San Jose State's Department of Justice Studies. Thank you so much for your time and your insight on all of this. Let's get over to our weather now with First Alert meteorologist Darren Peck. Depends on where you're at, but if you're right here in the city, you're seeing a lot of gray.
Yeah, there's very few places that are actually waking up to clear skies. Some are. Inland Contra Costa County, some parts of the Tri-Valley.
All right, well, if you go outside this morning, it's not going to be so pretty.
Gray start with June gloom pretty much dominating the weather for most of us, but like by 11, distant memory, more sunshine than anything else today.
Looking forward to it.
Something to look forward to. This is why I like living out in the East Bay. I just check the cameras for the backyard. It already looks nice. Hey, the peninsula is the same way. Just all the time. You guys can come visit. Well, remember, you can watch us right after this newscast on our sister station, KBCW 44, Cable 12, and our streaming service, CBS News Bay Area.
We're going to talk about...
But if you do stick around right here, CBS Mornings is coming up next. Have yourself a great Wednesday. Love seeing those crowds, though, Justin. That's great. Plus, former President Donald Trump not holding back. He is pushing against federal charges against him. But first, we are taking a live look outside on your Wednesday morning. It is 5 a.m. and it's a little cloudy outside. And we do have a warming trend in the works. But Darren, I have to ask, I got a little bit of sprinkles on my windshield on my drive-in.
That's how thick the marine layer is this morning. We got the wet grape blanket to start out the day.
Yes, we do.
Yeah, we do. So
nice. That sounds just so comforting.
It's right. That's a nice way of talking about June gloom.
Ooh, would not want to be one of those passengers. Ooh. All right, let's look at our other top stories. Former President Donald Trump is now the first former or current president to face federal criminal charges. Trump pled not guilty to 37 counts in a Miami courtroom. That case centers on allegations Trump mishandled government documents and refused demands to return them. Last night at a fundraiser event in New Jersey, the former president lashed out at prosecutors and called the case against him political persecution. In the next half hour, we'll have Jared Hill outside Trump Tower with more on what's going on here. The man accused of attacking Paul Pelosi is due back in court today. A state trial date is expected to be set for David DePape. DePape is facing state and federal charges for breaking into the home of Nancy Pelosi and beating her husband. DePape has already pled not guilty to 6 charges, including attempted murder and first-degree residential burglary. His federal trial will start October 23rd. That's looking at your top stories. As Vegas waits to see what happens with the A's, they have a big reason to celebrate this morning. Take a look at this. Golden Knights fans celebrated on the streets after their team beat the Florida Panthers to win the coveted Stanley Cup. They took home the championship last night after knocking out the Panthers 9-3 in Game 5, winning the series 4-1. And the Golden Knights made history in the process. It's the franchise's first Stanley Cup win since the team was founded back in 2016. Knights captain Mark Stone scored a hat trick yesterday, but it was forward Jonathan Marchessault who earned the postseason's MVP award. Big congrats to them. Very, very exciting. It's 5:11. It might be a solution to all of those empty buildings we are seeing in San Francisco. What can be done to save downtown? Plus,
This kind of progress always seems impossible until it isn't.
First Lady Jill Biden in San Francisco, her message on gun violence. We'll be right back. On the Bay Area beat now, First Lady Jill Biden is visiting San Francisco this week to push for gun safety legislation. She attended a fundraising event yesterday. Kelsey Thorud was there and reports Biden spoke alongside a former lawmaker whose name is synonymous with the cause. Let's get a check on our weather now with First Alert meteorologist Darren Peck, and it's a little foggy outside this morning.
Yeah, and the thing about it is it's enough that it's misting. So, and it's not necessarily like...
It's 5:21. Elizabeth Holmes has a request from prison why the disgraced Theranos founder is objecting to paying back some of her victims. Plus, there's a new way to look at donating blood. See how one blood bank is tapping into mixed reality glasses to attract younger donors. We'll be right back. Today is World Blood Donor Day. In the last decade, donors under the age of 30 have dropped by nearly a third. Blood centers nationwide are now hoping some new tech could change that. Bradley Blackburn explains. Several blood banks have purchased these headsets and are rolling them out to donors this summer. Abbott says in addition to New York, centers in Chicago, Houston, and Columbus, Ohio will be among the first to use them. Creative. It's 5:25. Former President Trump maintaining his innocence this morning. A closer look at what played out inside the courtroom and what's ahead. Welcome back. Former President Trump is maintaining his innocence, speaking defiantly to his supporters in New Jersey last night. This came just hours after he appeared in a Miami courtroom where he pled not guilty to federal criminal charges over the alleged mishandling of highly classified U.S. military documents. Jared Hill live in New York for us this morning outside Trump Tower with the newest developments in this. And Jared, the former president really pushing back against those charges overnight.
Back to you.
Well, Jared, you know, he went right back onto his campaign trail. What does this mean for it?
Yeah.
All right, Jared, thanks so much. Reporting live from New York. Let's come back here to the Bay Area and taking a live look outside on our Wednesday morning from our Mark Hopkins camera. Barely seeing the top of our skyline this morning. It's kind of just one of those mornings where it's just like meh outside.
That's why they call it June gloom.
Definitely feeling it. I love the way you say it, too.
Yeah, sometimes you need to stress it the appropriate ways. There's very few cameras I can even use.
All right, thanks, Jocelyn. Let's look at our top stories now. A new proposal from two San Francisco city leaders aims to ban guns from what they call sensitive places. Supervisor Catherine Stephanie and City Attorney David Chu define those places as hospitals, places of worship, movie theaters, parks, and grocery stores. This proposal comes after a violent week in the city. 9 people were injured in a mass shooting in the Mission District on Friday. And the next day, 3 others were shot at a nightclub in the city's Balboa Park neighborhood. Attorneys for Theranos founder Elizabeth Holmes are making the case that she should not pay restitution when she gets out of prison. Originally, Holmes and CEO Sunny Balwani were ordered to pay $542 million to the victims of their crimes. But lawyers for Holmes say she has limited financial resources and should not be forced to pay $250 a month. Federal prosecutors recently filed that clerical errors meant a payment schedule had not yet been set for Holmes. Nima Momeni had a big day in court. The man accused of killing tech executive Bob Lee appeared alongside his new defense team. Lauren Tom says more on where the case goes from here. Well, we can expect to see Momeni and his new team at the preliminary hearing, which has been set for July 31st. It's almost 5:40. Check fraud is back in a big way. How officials say you can protect yourself right now. Plus,
you did this to my family. My family has been torn apart since this happened.
A new call for change this morning in Alameda County. The concerns over more money being spent on the county jail. Welcome back. This is your Money Watch report. Amazon's cloud computing unit, Amazon Web Services, is back online this morning. It comes after following outages yesterday, impacting thousands of users. Publishers like the Associated Press were unable to use their website, while The Verge reported apps for fast food chains Taco Bell and McDonald's were also down. It took about 2 hours for Amazon to get operations back to normal. The company says the root cause of the outage was tied to a service called AWS Lambda, which lets customers run code on different applications. New data from the Financial Crimes Enforcement Network shows check fraud is on the rise again. That data shows banks made around 680,000 reports of check fraud last year. That's nearly double the total from the year before. Officials are now warning Americans to avoid mailing checks or, if possible, use a secure mail drop like those inside the post office. That's a check of your Money Watch headlines. Ugh, my family was a victim of that last year.
Oh,
And it was a
no.
complete mess. Yeah. So feel for anyone who has had to deal with that. All right, the weather.
Wow, what's a good reminder? It doesn't happen to anybody.
No, it can really happen to anybody. Small family business. It's
All right,
rough.
you mentioned you had some sprinkles on your drive in?
Yeah, right before I got onto the Bay Bridge.
Yes, good example. Right in the bay, anywhere near water. So certainly if you're near the coast.
Well, despite decreased revenues and a strained budget, mental health advocates in Alameda County are calling for a massive new investment in psychiatric treatment to try to curb the surge of mental illness. They staged a rally yesterday morning to protest more money being spent on the county jail. John Ramos has more with that story.
The Alameda County Board of Supervisors are considering a budget that would send tens of millions of dollars to expand the county jail, including a new psychiatric facility. But the families who deal with mental illness say they are tired of the majority of the county's mental health services coming from behind bars. Outside the Alameda County Administration Building is a memorial to the children who died from violence. Barbara Doss says her son DeJuan Armstrong isn't listed there because she says it was the county that killed him.
You did this to my family. My family has been torn apart since this happened.
Barbara says DeJuan was in the Santa Rita jail for a case dating back to when he was 13 years old. He struggled, and body cam footage shows deputies putting him in a full-body restraint with a mask. A few minutes later, he passed out and died. It happened in 2018, and Barbara says no one has ever shown any remorse. In the last 9 years, 67 inmates have died at Santa Rita, 5 so far this year, and yet it is the place where most people having a mental crisis are taken.
Unfortunately, it's the one place that they can't say no. So basically it's the garbage can of our society, and they just throw everybody in there, no matter what their circumstances.
That's why on this day, mental health advocates were protesting at the county. Supervisors are considering a plan to spend $80 million to expand the troubled jail, including a new psychiatric facility.
The facility that is being proposed for this year would not actually be a treatment facility. It would be just offices to house behavioral health staff. That's not a solution to a problem.
The protesters say every dollar that goes to Santa Rita ends up focusing mental illness treatment at that location. They want the board to scrap the jail expansion plan and spend that money and more on a full-spectrum mental health services system.
If there were treatment facilities for folks, if there were full-service partnerships and staffing, right, to be able to make these things happen, you wouldn't see folks being criminalized because they wouldn't be justice involved in the first place.
From Barbara's point of view, justice played no part in what happened to her son.
There's no justice. They cannot bring him back. I need somebody to be held accountable.
We talk a lot about COVID, but it is mental illness that is the real epidemic plaguing our society. And advocates say the only hope of controlling it is to approach it as a medical emergency.
It's just another challenge that we really didn't need coming out of COVID.
It's a bike lane battle. My businesses are worried they will pay the price.
Gianna, thanks. It is 5:57. It was quite the scene by the A's fans at the Coliseum. Check this out. The message to ownership last night. A live look for you outside for what we can see with all the fog right there. We'll have more coming up after this.